Outside the Box Reviews, our month-long look at horror figures continues, and today we kick off Slashers Week with the NECA Cult Classics Series 2 Leatherface figure from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, like most of the early Cult Classics figures from NECA, I missed out. I never picked this guy up when he was in the stores originally, and I don't know what happened, and I don't think it was limited just to my area, but a while back, my Toys R Us, for some reason, pulled out a whole case of Cult Classics Series 2, just fresh as it ever was, slightly yellowed packaging, and put them back on the shelves for sale. And I was finally able to pick this guy up. This is yet another figure that we have to keep in mind going forward, that it's an older figure. It kind of has to play by those older figure rules, but let's take a look at what we got here. And here we have Leatherface's display base, just a very simple base, has kind of a thick sand texture to it. It's very uneven, looking like the Texas dirt. Has some sparse vegetation, a little kind of mushroomy looking thing over here. 2 pegs where his feet go, and the vague outline of his boot imprinted in the sand. Very basic, but that's all you really need for him. Leatherface also comes with the Dead Armadillo from the opening shot of the movie, and this is probably the most accurate piece that comes with the whole figure because I lived in Texas for a while, and I think this is the only way I ever saw an armadillo dead. But it's got okay detail, especially for the time. The head doesn't look too good, but it's also very tiny. The texture on him is decent. The tail's okay. The legs are kind of curled up inside of his body. Just a little weird looking, but it's passable as a little set decoration piece. And here we have the chainsaw, of course. It's the bright yellow saw. It's got a little blood splatter on the blade, but nothing too crazy. Obviously the chain part on it. Some more splatter back here. Very simple once again. The handle is very thin, and I'm very worried taking it in and out of the character's hand that eventually it might just break because it's pretty flimsy feeling. This part up here actually I believe did break on me. Yep, you can see it right there. A little hairline crack where I had to super glue it back together, which is kind of a bummer. If we compare it to the Mezco Cinema Fear Series 1 Leatherface chainsaw, I think Mezco did a better job here. I like the color a little better, the shape's a little nicer, the handle's much more robust and able to go in and out of the figure's hand better. Just better detail overall. The only place where NECA has Mezco here is the blade shape. Theirs looks real, Mezco's looks really strange. Mezco also went way overboard with the blood. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't that bloody of a movie, ironically, so probably a little more accurate to go with this level of blood on NECA's version. For the mask, this is the dinner scene mask, one of the 3 masks from the original movie. And it's a decent representation of it. You have the makeup on it, of course, that Leatherface added. I believe that was a cut scene of him actually adding the makeup. You can see it split down here, so you actually see his chin sticking out through it. Very minimal stitching on this one. It's not like the Kill mask that's made up of all different pieces and looks very weathered and inhuman. This still maintains a look of humanity to it. There's the big plume of hair coming off the top with some decent shading in it. Now, a lot of the figures that came out in this time were basically mildly articulated statues, and Leatherface kind of plays into it here. I like the fact that he actually has a coat that is swept back to emulate him running, chasing down the girl from the end of the movie, and it's pulled back, his tie is off to the side like he's running, and it's just a really cool action pose. The jacket is a soft rubber, so it's somewhat pliable. Is the hard sculpted shirt underneath with a lot of great dirty detailing on it. The tie doesn't look nearly weathered enough to fit with the rest of his clothing. It's pretty bright and plain. The coat itself has some brown, especially around this edge here that's sticking out. The hand is decent, has some little veins going on in the back. Over on the left side, he has his watch, so you can figure out what time it was when Leatherface was chasing people down. Don't know how accurate that really would be, since it was supposed to be dinner time, and that looks like it's showing about 1:45. Down here, he has his pants. They're okay in the detail department. They're very glossy, which is kind of strange. It doesn't really fit. There's some brown shading on it, but a lot of the detail kind of just seems lost in the sculpt and the shiny, glossy paint. And then he has his boots with little blood splatter on it. The blood splatter is very odd, actually, because it's actually a raised bit on the sculpt. It's not just painted on, it's elevated. So I don't know if it's supposed to be just be chunks of somebody on his shoes, or if it really is just supposed to be some blood splatter, but it's a little odd looking. You can also see this back leg is permanently up in this kind of position. Like I said, it's a somewhat articulated statue. And of course, he has the peg holes on the bottom of his feet. For articulation, we have a ball joint in the neck with a pretty good range of motion. Pin socket shoulder, so you can move out to the side and forward and backwards. You can swivel at a cut joint at the elbow, which really, if you swivel at any, it doesn't look right. Rotate at the wrist, rotate at the waist, and that's it. From the waist down, he's a statue. So this figure is very specific to a scene in the movie, and we've gotten that before. Looking at NECA with their Terminator line and several others, they have figures that really depict a character from a very specific time in a movie. And sometimes that's really cool. Here, I just really don't know. I have to keep in mind that when this figure came out, the environment for horror action figures was very different. It was a major boom. You could make any character you wanted, it seemed. They were selling, people were buying them. It really was a great time for collecting this kind of stuff just because there was so much of it available. And by this point, I believe NECA had already done their version of the kill costume of Leatherface. McFarlane had done one years before, and if you want to tap the original movie, one of the most iconic versions of the character, it's probably the way you want to go, is to continue milking the first film, and this is a way to do it otherwise. I like that Mezco had given us the option to do the old lady costume out of parts from the original figure, and to have both the kill and the old lady from one figure, but obviously you couldn't do that with the dinner scene version. So I guess it's cool that NECA made it, but it's hard to recommend this figure with any modern sensibility. The articulation is so limited, and even though there is quite a bit of it, you can't pose him really anyway. The elbows mean you have to have him holding the chainsaw, and he really can't get that chainsaw to go many places, and turning him at the waist or turning his head isn't really going to change that. You can't even really get him to emulate the chainsaw dance from the end of the movie, which is the really most iconic part of Leatherface in this costume. So I'm going to give him a not recommend. It's not a very large not recommend, just because I have to account for the age of this figure and cut it a little slack in that department, but it's just not something that I'm thrilled with. Make sure you check out Outside the Box Reviews on Facebook. There'll be a link in the description below. Also follow Outside the Box Reviews on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. And until next time, make sure you stay tuned all week as we continue to look at slasher action figures, and all month as we continue our look at horror figures for the month of October. Is there a smudge on the lens? Is that what's up? Yes, there is.